Hi, I'm Sara Bowman. I'm a project manager at the Center for Open Science. I'm really excited to be in this session today because it is right up our alley. We are a nonprofit technology startup company. We're mission-driven, and our mission is improving the openness, integrity, and reproducibility of scientific research. So we've been around for 2 years now. We were founded in March of 2013. We have 32 full-time employees and 25 interns that all started a week and a half ago. So I started working at the center a year ago, and I was employee 19, so we are growing really rapidly. We're primarily foundation funded. And as I said, our mission is improving the openness, integrity, and reproducibility of scientific research. And we approach that in 3 different ways. We have an infrastructure team, a meta-science team, and a community team. So mostly what I'm going to talk about today is our community and infrastructure projects, but we also conduct meta-science research. So meta-science being the science of science, to understand best practices to make science reproducible, and what we can learn from these best practices and how to implement them. So first, I want to tell you about some of our community efforts around these topics of enhancing access to data and research transparency. I work primarily with the community team. We build communities of editors, publishers, funders, stakeholders in the scientific enterprise. And I got a really nice lead-in here to talk about the Transparency and Openness Promotion Guidelines, which are the top guidelines. They'll be published in Science at the end of next month. And they are the output of a meeting that we held in conjunction with Science Magazine and BITS, which is the Berkeley Initiative for Transparency in the Social Sciences. We gathered about 45 journal editors and funders and other interested researchers to develop these guidelines. What we heard from a lot of editors was, we want to enhance our commitment to transparency about the research we publish, but we really don't want to have to write new author guidelines. Can you do that for us? So we gathered this group together, and we put together the guidelines, which are divided across 8 different areas. You can see them listed on the screen. So they're modular in the vertical aspect. They're modular in which areas of the research process they cover, but they're also modular in increasing levels of commitment to transparency. So a journal could go to the guidelines and look at the design and analysis transparency portion and say, you know what, we already are at a level 1, and we want to increase our commitment, so we will adopt level 2. Whereas for a different part of the guidelines, they might be at a different level or want to adopt a very different level. So they're very modular. They can be adopted as is, or they could be modified. This will very much be an ongoing process. We're at version 1 of the guidelines now that will be published, but we're very interested to hear from the community about implementation of the guidelines in order to more improve them. So if you go to cos.io/top, you can see the guidelines there. We are looking now for top signatories, which is journals, organizations, funders, who basically agree on the principles of the importance of data access and research transparency, and who will commit to conducting a review over the course of the next year about which levels of the guidelines they may wish to adopt. So I've put some of the signatories here. I made this slide last night at 10 o'clock. It was at 53. That number is now out of date. So the list is growing. And if you have more questions about that, cos.io/top, you can read the guidelines. If you have questions, you can email top@cos.io. Happy to talk with you more on how you can bring this to your journals. So another one of our community efforts is developing an alternative format for publications called registered reports. A registered report gets at some issues of, one, publication bias. Only positive results get published. This is a study that someone did showing what percentage of the literature showed positive results. So it gets at the publication bias issue. It also gets at some questionable research practices and researcher degrees of freedom, exactly how their studies are, how their data is perhaps analyzed and ways to get more positive results or significant results. So a registered report attacks those issues, basically. This is the typical way research is conducted. Design the experiment, collect and analyze your data, report on it, write your report on it, and then publish it. And the peer review comes here, in between writing the report and publishing it. Registered report moves peer review to after the design phase. So the study is reviewed on the strength of its design and the strength of its analysis methodology, rather than whether or not it's an exciting result or a positive finding. So there's an ad hoc committee of journal editors who are interested in this format of publishing. They've put together some great resources to make it really easy for journal editors to adopt this format of publishing. You can see Chris Chambers is a neuroscientist in Wales. He is a huge champion of this format of publishing. He's an associate editor at Cortex, and he brought the registered report format there. And he's the chair of this committee. So who publishes these? 16 plus journals are publishing these. Most of the journals, all but one of the journals actually, offers this format as an additional format to their traditional publishing model. There is one journal that is only doing registered reports. But this is an interesting approach to publishing, and we're seeing a lot of interest and adoption in it. So if you want to read more, the URL is there. All of the resources for how you could work this into a journal workflow, also resources for authors who are interested in publishing in this format. One of our other community efforts that I think is relevant to journal editors is what we call badges to acknowledge open practices. So we've talked about requiring data availability and requiring that the data be deposited and publicly available before publication. If you don't want to adopt a requirement, this is the carrot as opposed to the stick as a badge. It's a visible signal to readers of the journal that a select manuscript has made its data available, or its materials available, or it has pre-registered a study. So much like registered reports, there's an ad hoc group of editors that are interested in this. These badges appear at the top of a manuscript. Psychological Science is the journal that first adopted these. And they put the badges right at the top of the manuscript. They include it in the table of contents. And then at the end of every article, there's a description of where you can find the data and materials and the pre-registration. So the three badges are open data, firstly, which means that the data is available somewhere publicly accessible in some sort of open access repository. We heard the story about the website suddenly disappearing. This is why the badge requirement is that you have to put it in a repository and not on your personal website. We want to make sure that it's going to stick around. Open materials, so maybe your code or if you surveyed people, you would share your survey materials. Things like that, much the same, available open access. And then pre-registered is somewhere you have listed a public time-stamped registration of what your research plan is, and your registration comes before you've looked at your data. This is what the badges look like in Psychological Science. This is an email they send out every week about their online first articles. You can see they're included right there under the title. And what Psych Science has seen in the last year and a half is that they've gone from almost no data sharing whatsoever to 25% of their articles getting an open data badge. So people are willing to share their data, it seems. So those are our community efforts that are aimed at journal editors to improve data access. And then I also want to tell you about some of our infrastructure projects. So infrastructure meaning free open source tools that we build to help facilitate some of these things. So our main platform is the Open Science Framework, which is a free open source tool to help researchers manage their entire research workflow, from planning through execution, reporting, archiving, and then discovery. It's at osf.io. You should all go there and make an account and play around with it, and then let me know what you think. It's a part collaboration tool, part documentation, and part archive. This is what a project would look like on the OSF. You can see there every project is given a title. You can have any number of contributors to it. There's a wiki, so that if you're going to make your research public, you can describe provide some more context to the public who's reading it. And then you can divide a project into individual components. You'll see the coded paper is one component there. The components have separate public-private features, or public-private settings, and also contributor settings, so you get fine-grained control over who has access to what. Provides built-in version control, so if you send in your manuscript for review and you get it back and you need to make edits, and now all of a sudden your final manuscript is now final manuscript 2 and final manuscript 3 and final manuscript 3. You don't have that problem anymore. You upload the document to the website with the same file name, and the versions get replaced, and you get access to all the previous versions of the file, as well as you can see download counts for every version of the file. If your file is public, you can see how many people are downloading it. I already mentioned merging public and private workflows, fine-grained control over who has access to what. You can keep things private or make other things public. And we provide incentives for making things open, because that's what we really want people to do. So incentives for openness include the download counts that I mentioned, but also access to statistics about how many times your author's work has been viewed, and how someone found your research, as well as where in the world they're viewing it from. And then you can link to other projects. If your project is really related to another project, you can link the two so that they're more discoverable between each other. We also provide persistent citable identifiers. So every file contributor is given a 5-character unique identifier. You see it at the top. WX7CK is the one for this. That will never change, so it is citable for people who, for users who feel that they need a DOI or an ARC ID for citation of data. We also mint those through DataCite, so that is available as well. I mentioned the idea of pre-registering your research or doing a registered report. The OSF serves as a registry, so there are some domain-specific registries. The American Economics Association has a registry, clinicaltrials.gov, but for disciplines where there isn't a discipline-specific registry, the OSF serves as that. It creates a new copy of your project that's got its own persistent identifier. It's time-stamped and it's frozen, so no changes can be made, and it always links back to the original project. So when you register your project, you enter a little bit of data about why you're creating the registration. So it attaches that metadata to your registration. And the biggest part is that it connects services that researchers already use. So we want to meet researchers where they are and not have them change their entire workflow to be able to use this tool. So we connect to things like GitHub, Amazon S3. We connect to the Harvard Dataverse, as well as Figshare. And the idea here is that we will continue to add more services that we can connect to, including institutional repositories. And ultimately, we'd love to be able to connect to manuscript submission systems for journals, so that researchers can use the OSF to write all of their materials and then easily submit into a journal for publication. So here are more things. I'm out of time. Here are more things, some things we connect to, some things we will connect to in the future, and I can take any questions maybe later.
Thanks.
Thank you.